Speak Up Africa is a digital platform that creates space for digital conversations to be made, specifically from end-to-end usage, from the users of the technological spaces, to the producers of it, to the creators, to the innovators, to the labor rights, to the policy increments, to governance, and all other technological dimensions. This is Speak Up Africa. I am Zaha Speaks. We inform, engage, and empower. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Speak Up Africa. Today, I have a very special guest targeting one interesting topic that we have always wanted to debunk, and that's tech accountability. I'll let him do the introductions for himself. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Odanga Madung. I do many things, but for the purposes of this podcast, I am a tech researcher and journalist as well.
Interesting.
And my background as with regard to this topic is that I've spent a great amount of time researching it across the world, actually. And in particular, I'm the immediate former head of a senior researcher at the Mozilla Foundation in charge of elections and platform integrity.
Great.
Yeah.
So before we even dive into the topic, how did you find yourself here? Looking at, we have the audience that's probably trying to figure out what's my pathway going forward. What took you here? How did you find yourself here?
It's not necessarily entirely by accident. It's just a cascade of doing one thing after another that led me to this point. I started off doing my tech journalism at BuzzFeed back in 2019, where I did a few stories there under the tutelage of a guy called Craig Silverman. Back then, I was also a Deutsche Welle Academy fellow. So, all one thing led to another, and I joined Mozilla as a fellow, as a tech and society fellow. There where I actually ended up doing quite a bit of research into tech accountability. That was my deepest not deepest introduction, but deepest interaction with tech accountability. And then from there is when I sort of moved up the ladder within Mozilla, where now I became the senior researcher for platform integrity and elections. And my speciality was basically looking at how platform interaction with society and political process tends to lead to outsized real-world effects.
So looking at the technical scene around Kenya per se, what does tech accountability look like for us as a country? Where are we? What are the gaps? What is this that we call tech accountability, especially in Kenya now that we have so many facets of tech?
Tech accountability, that's an interesting question because I like to think about it. I mean, I've done this all over the world, but specifically within Kenya, I think accountability looks like, looking for, if I was to put it in plain English, let me put it in very plain English, looking for all the bad things that tech companies are doing within our jurisdiction that we can claim justice for. That's purely it, right? So whether it is the extractive nature, and, you have to understand that tech is an industry. Just because you can't touch it or feel it, or you can see it. Right? But there is a way in which it is just as extractive as an industry, right? And just as harmful to consumers. And now I think as we begin to think about it, is very much many of our democracies are beholden to it now. It's about thinking about that entire range of things and trying. I think for me as a journalist, my job is just accountability. Is that aspect of I'm trying to find the real stories around it. I'm trying to find what accountability. So what are they trying to hide? What are they really thinking about? What are the bad things that they're enabling? I just found that I became really good at that, at working around that, and decided to just dive head on into it. And I've explored it for years and years. I think for years I've covered terrorism, I've covered health, I've covered politics, I've like so very many facets, influencers, everything, like as much of it as I can cover in a very wide array. So there's lots and lots of stories in terms of how technology intersects with your everyday life that come and go all the time.
And so much changes gradually that people can't keep up. Do you think Kenyans are aware of the interaction, especially as consumers in the tech space? Do you what are those things that you think when I'm using an app, when I'm ordering food, when I'm just using tech per se, what are those things that I need to be very aware of, especially when it comes to data protection?
On the data protection side, to be honest, the truth is it needs real accountability because, to be honest, a consumer is actually never aware about, on the data protection side, to be specific. A consumer is actually never really aware about what data could possibly be taken from them in the process of using a specific piece of technology, one. And two, what is done with that data is also not something that they typically
do.
So I'll give you an example, a very good example that I actually worked on, which actually affected a lot of Kenyan women, but completely went silently under the radar. At the Mozilla Foundation, a while back, before they had all the layoffs and stuff, they used to have this project called Privacy Not Included. Now, it basically used to examine the privacy policies of various applications across the world, but it was mostly very Western and American focused. But they've examined things like, for example, cars nowadays are basically walking computers. So what happens to all that data? Now, guess what these guys looked into? Period apps. Okay?
Oh my God.
Yes.
They examined period trackers.
Yes, period trackers. Yeah. And I remember, I wish this was like a Joe Rogan podcast where we could
blow it up.
But they went through the privacy policies and privacy practices of several of the world's top period trackers and found that they were practically, number one, where they had promised that they would be keeping the data. I think I'd need to get the facts straight, but it sounded something like these things are basically huge privacy landmines. Your period data is being sold to an advertiser somewhere, which is being paired with.
So the predictions, whatever. So every company around sanitation.
It's based on your cycle. If you're using one of those apps, it's quite possible.
There's one on Apple, on iPhones, where on the health one.
The health one, maybe if it's the Apple one, for sure. But look, you cannot rely on Apple, right, as privacy infrastructure. 99%, 94% of Kenyans, it's actually, Google released this stat, 94% of Kenyans are using Android, right?
And
if a chick is going to go ahead and pick a period app on she'll pick the first one. She'll pick the first one. Now, be examined like that whole bunch of apps, and I went to my wife and I asked her, do you use any of these apps? She's like, yeah, I know that one.
Whole time. You're an ad catalog.
Yeah, I was just like, wow. Oh, you know that? So, wow. It's really crazy how pervasive many of these violations happen, and we don't know about them.
But the terms and conditions are also so long. Barely do you have the time to go through all this. Of course.
Yeah, it's by design. 90% of these things are by design. I mean, good lawyers, that's unfortunate.
Scarcity of knowledge is also very expensive.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, but also at the same time, it's like all of these things operate on what I like to call an economy of trust.
Yeah.
You get, and so you really have to think about what does an economy of trust allow nefarious actors to get away with?
Yeah.
You get.
I'm very eager to know. Now, of course, if period, and that's very crazy because often, especially as women, you're trying to see, I need to 3 days in advance to know. I'm looking at food apps. I'm looking at supermarkets that have now online shops and stuff like that. Jumia, etc. Not necessarily to pick out companies, but I'm looking at a trend whereby we're always having young people shop online now. And
even old people.
Yeah, okay, of course. But you search on, let's say, some makeup kit, and all of a sudden your entire internet, the algorithm keeps bringing this up. Do they consent us by any way?
Yes, they do. You ticked on it. So.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but I don't think that's the problem. So there is a very, how do I call it? There's a very... You have to think about it from a very first principles level.
Yeah.
Right? So one of the best, there used to be a newsletter that I read once, and to me, the headline really stuck to me. This woman basically the headline of a newsletter was something along the lines of how how targeted advertising is ruining the world. You get?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can't really talk so much about the legalities and illegalities of what targeted advertising is doing to you and all of that. But it's actually about how it incentivizes the design of applications, right? And the subsequent harms that come out afterwards. The entire internet ecosystem that you use is based off of the idea that someone needs to sell you adverts.
Yes.
You get? Now that has implications on the addictive design that they're able to create around many of these applications. It's primarily because their job is to sell your time. Their job is to sell your eyeballs. Their job is to sell your activity on these applications. And the more that they can gather about it, the more that they're able to make a lot more money about it. And now I think the reckoning is even clearer when you begin to consider the fact that when you look at the amount of power that people have been able to amass by using this specific type of model, all you have to do is look at it, the Elon Musks and the Mark Zuckerbergs and Sundar Pichais of the world, and the position that they occupy, at least within the influence of the White House right now, and the very real effects it's now having on things like USAID and all of that. Yeah. So, this is the real, for me, I'm not so worried. I'm not really that concerned about the is it good, is it bad, targeted advertising thing. I'm more concerned at a foundational level, right? About how does this change how people decide to build things? Yeah. Right? Because incentives matter. You get? So that's the main thing that I think about when it comes to targeted advertising. And that, these are the guys that are making the most money in the world. And like someone even told me something very funny. He was like, in the 60s, at least in the West, and because I mean, this our economy is not yet so sophisticated and mature for that kind of competition. But I would dare to think about it as well. But in the 60s, you used to be like the smartest people in the world were working on the hardest problems in the world. Right? They were physicists trying to win wars.
Atomic diffusion.
Atomic diffusion. You get? Yeah. But now he was like some of the true costs of like the rise of the tech giants and all these other big mega tech companies is that the smartest people in the world are trying to make a like button. And to me, that was like it was the best one of the. So
that's such a messy.
Yeah, and I like that. Like I feel like that's the real conversation we're supposed to be having.
Yeah.
When we tech is not actually what happens on your phone, by the way. Yeah.
It's way beyond.
It is way for me.
Behavioral science.
I'm always thinking.
Patterns.
Yeah, I'm always thinking about it outside. It's an amazing story. When you think beyond that screen, the story and the effects are amazing.
So interesting, because I was listening to an interview where someone was saying one of the greatest inventions of man at this moment is AI. But before we even dive into AI, that we're having it as the same level as when we found out about atoms and stuff. Diving into the fact that I know one crisis, especially for Africa, as a dump site for most of the time for the world, content moderation. The scary, traumatizing events we have seen from content moderators has been immense. I just want you to touch on it. On your thoughts, what exactly is going on in Africa when it comes to content moderation? And how do we keep these spaces accountable? Because these are also human beings having to debunk very immense data.
Well, I have a funny story, first of all, about this. So I've spoken to a number of content moderators. I have worked with some of the people who have been trying to do that case for years. I consider many of them to be allies. Yeah. There are different skills around it. I think the entire content moderation business as a whole is very interesting. Aside from the Africa chapter of it, again, I studied the internet at a very expansive rate. And this is why I think there's a big problem in content moderation in general. Pornhub, okay, had a case whereby they had like third-party copyright infringements on a number of the videos on their site, right? And so like over a period of I don't know how long, they had to delete millions and millions of videos from their archives.
Yeah.
That entire process was done by 30 people. It was done by 30 people. 30 people. You can fact check me on it, but I think it's like a handful of people who did that entire
And we're not talking
process.
we're talking
this
about
is like
very dark.
Yeah, this is the most extreme part. So I wanted to start from that very extreme example.
Have a brainwave missing.
Okay. And then now we move into the bigger, let's move into the bigger example, which is the controversies around content moderation and within Africa and all of this kind of stuff. I mean, I think I'm not going to talk about what is already out there.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to talk about what I really think is the battle here.
Yeah.
So the thing about it is that we definitely are now at an age where, and when you look at the tech oligarchy in the States now, firmly imprinting itself as the oligarchy, the rise of AI as AI everything, and, basically the platformized future of the world.
Yeah.
Right? The platformized future of the world depends on content moderators, right? And the thing about it is also, content moderation is a very expensive exercise. Yeah. So the sweatshops have always been the backbone of industrial revolutions.
Yeah.
Okay. So in that sense, what this thing is really a fight about is you get the future of like what the next industrial revolution is gonna
look like. Yeah.
And what role Africa and perhaps specifically Kenya is going to play in that.
Yeah.
Now that actually represents a very huge opportunity. So I want you to also look at it. There's one perspective nobody's looking at here. Polarity, right? That there's a very serious business case here.
Yeah. Right?
That the fight for the future of the next industrial revolution partly depends on a lot of these workers. Okay? And that this is actually what we're really trying to think about here. Yeah. What is Kenya's place in the next industrial revolution? Mm-hmm. Now, what we have to try and figure out is how we set the terms.
Of course.
Right? For our place in this industrial revolution, and also whether that's going to be competitive at the same time.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, the truth is, when you look at the case of Sama, the drama between Sama, the telenovela, actually, I like to call it a telenovela, that is Sama versus Facebook versus the content moderators, and how it's shifted back and forth to the point where now even President Ruto has to weigh in, and, you've got a whole bunch of other players that are involved in it. You get we really have to find a way that wins for us because, again, yes, it is bad. Yes, there's a lot of things that are wrong with it.
But with good structure, we can get something out of it.
There has to be a way to, because this is literally the West cannot afford to pay its own people.
Yes.
Okay?
Of course.
Kenya has a very English fluent, young population. Yeah, English fluent, nice hub, young population, good internet that can enable us to begin that, that first leap.
Pace, yeah.
Right? And many of these kids are already doing these jobs. But then at the same time, we've got some terrible practices in terms of a terrible tradition of labor. Right? The problems the content moderators are facing are the same problems that you see in tea picking farms.
Yeah.
Same problems that you see in schools. You get all of these types of things. So, I mean, it's such a huge conundrum. It's such a huge conundrum. And I wish there was a way we could set a standard for ourselves and that the people who play in that industry are able to just say, look, guys, let's set a standard for ourselves in terms of what we're able to take in and what we're able to not take in. Or else the truth is that entire industry and that entire potential is just going to go somewhere else. And we're already seeing signs of that, with for example, Major Rail moving lots of its content moderation exercise in an outfit to a country like Ghana because in general, they're also look, it's too hard to do business here in Kenya.
Yeah.
Right? So, this is the real, and I don't have an exact conclusion about it, but I have been able to interact with now very clearly what both sides of this thing are and what to understand, this is actually what the real battle for this thing is. there are actually lots and lots of people who are looking here and saying like this is the best location to create like
because it
data
is
training
the
and
infrastructure
annotation
around it.
Yeah, and it's not just about content moderation. It's about the entire ecosystem that enables AI to happen.
Yeah.
Like AI companies are gonna be hungry for data, right? Because the internet is going to be filled with lots and lots of what we call AI slop.
Yeah.
Right? So like there's a need for this thing. You get. But then the question is, how do we cure it of its inherently extractive practices, right? But also, if you think about, like, again, man, it's a tough one because many countries were built off of, you get, like, starting from that point of we become the sweatshop of the world, and then from there we must capitalize somewhere. So the Chinese miracle, okay, you can fact check me on this
now.
Yeah, but I mean, again, it's that like that's what Kenya Kwanza I think were thinking.
Yeah,
it's always been that's how our leaders think. Huh? They think that okay, they face the reality that we're a third world country, so we must start somewhere. And so they will always say that TVET, the TVET programs and the Juakali programs, etc. Now, digital Juakali work, okay, is actually data annotation and content moderation type of work.
Yeah.
The hope is that you're supposed to start from there and then upskill.
Yeah.
But that's not a promise that you can count on.
Not in Kenya.
Yeah, so there's a strong debate here. And I see how, the kids are also like, look, Facebook makes too much money from all of these kind of things. We deserve better pay.
Yeah.
We deserve better work conditions. We deserve psychosocial
health,
support.
bro.
And all of that. But even me, I'm like, I don't know how much. There's also a point at which me, I'm like, I know that job. Okay? Hey,
it's not funny.
I'm like, I don't know what level of psychosocial support you can get.
You might need to heal from that.
Yeah.
Like I'm seeing.
Yeah, but there's a story that was done about a company in India that many people feel is getting it right. Yeah. I didn't get the details about it, but you can just go and check things from Time by a guy called Billy Perijo. You can just check, like, I'm very pro solutions when it comes to this thing. We need to find a way out.
Tech is well fine-tuned to actually get us into a global map in terms of doing better. I think we're just, look at our digital act. I
haven't read it though, but
oh my God, chaotic. And I think we're not very comprehensive to look at both ends. I think we structure a lot of our policies to protect not even consumers, producers often, then we look at consumers as a place of, wealth as well. I'm very keen to understand what is the role really, especially of industry players too.
Because the regulators.
Yeah, the regulators, government, policies, where becomes a touch point with the tech world. Who really regulates these regulators anyway?
So, I mean, with regard to this particularly, majority of it falls on CAK. Yeah. But again, tech is an industry.
Again.
Okay. So stop thinking about tech only as something that is regulated by CAK.
Yeah.
Because 90% of the time you might even find there's no leverage.
Yeah.
In maybe trying to work CAK. I've actually had a lot of success trying to get the Poisons Board to comment on how tech companies were selling bogus cures.
That's true.
You get, like, there are many aspects of it that many regulators can come in and look at, right?
And it needs to be very comprehensive because it's way too.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking labor violations for the what is it called? For the content moderators that's a labor issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then it is a tech issue anyway.
Exactly. You talk about
energy too.
Energy.
So many key players that can form a force.
Yeah, exactly. So it depends on where you look at it from and what are the levers you're trying to pull in terms of the accountability measures you're working with. I mean, of course, the umbrella, you are supposed to deal with CAK at any one point with anything, but
that's if they're dealable.
But there are always other ways. Because again, tech is not always just about tech. Tech is not like tech is the last story.
Screen.
Yeah, tech is the last story. The technology of your screen is the last thing you should think of when you think about tech accountability. There's a lot more. There's a much wider array of things to think about.
So looking at Kenya as a case study, and I'm very much thinking East Africa, knowing that a lot of countries do look at Kenya as a standpoint of progress and very
it is
forward moving. Yeah, it is. I think it's just that we really.
Now we've just started backsliding.
Yeah, but this is a place where even the young people here, very, very brilliant. So you see a lot of things coming up, automated by young people, and it's super interesting to see. Where do you see us going? What is the future of tech here? And what can necessarily young people, and I'm not excluding old people really, what do you think young people can get into? What are we supposed to look at in terms of, getting into the space? Because I'm seeing other countries actually fronting young innovators around tech spaces, seed funding for all these things. People are coming up with great, interesting stuff. What is the future of Kenya for that?
I don't know. I'm not a, how would I call it? I used to really be in the tech business side of things and all that, but I think nowadays I'm out of the loop very much. I find it hard to make bets on that.
Yeah, for sure.
And I also shudder in general, I shudder at the idea of just trying to foretell the future. I can't say
predictions.
But I can't say what are the bets. I prefer gambling as opposed to I prefer gambling as opposed to the idea of I want to provide this great tale of the future that
prophecy.
I'm not. I don't like the prophecy thing. What are the gambles? I don't. From what the landscape that I see, I don't know.
Actually, tech is pretty wide. Depends.
It's pretty wide. I mean, tech is also everything. Everything. That camera, it's this microphone, all of it. I think it's for us to just again understand what is the interesting opportunity. The issue is also, again, when I look at technology in general, I don't see it. I see it as such an extractive industry where the money, actually, to be honest, the biggest places where the money is to be made are at its most extractive places.
Yeah.
So, for example, now actually, let me look at it from that perspective. And please forgive me if this comes out.
You're forgiven.
Yeah, I'm just saying, it's true. The reason the most extractivism. The reason extractivism is extractive is that it actually has the most margin. Okay, so that's the issue. So, for example, data centers. This is a country that is prime for data centers.
Yeah.
You look at the
Hubs.
Microsoft G42 deal. There are many other guys. We've got abundance of land, flat land, easy access to green energy and all that kind of stuff. But that in itself, the amount of water, the effects on local communities and all that kind of stuff that it ends up having. It's really crazy. It's nuts. I do wonder if people realize, of course, thank God Trump is there, so maybe that deal won't go through. But the Microsoft G42 deal even looked impossible in terms of its ability to use our own grid, our national grid. Right? It really did. But again, lots of questions around it. Secondly, you look at things like carbon offsetting for tech companies. Yeah, that's still a huge thing.
Are we even there yet?
Northern Rangelands Trust already was taking money from Meta and Netflix in order to be able
closing off communities.
Yes,
it's a whole gamble.
Yeah. But they're already taking lots of money from tech companies. Yeah. To actually do carbon offset. That is still the future of tech, by the way. That is still the future of tech. You get? That's actually still the future of tech. Make no mistakes about it. If Northern Rangelands Trust closes or gets messed up, okay, they will simply look for another person to do the carbon offsetting. And they will continuously need more. Nuclear power is back in fashion because of AI.
Yeah.
You get? So this is where
we're in serious trouble, aren't we?
No, I don't like painting the future as trouble. I want to be an optimist. I want
an opportunist?
Optimist, not opportunist. No, please. I want to be an optimist.
Yeah.
I want to believe that, just we can find solutions that work for everybody. We have to have a win-win somewhere. We can also, yes, we have to have a win-win. We need to embrace solutions. Yes, some things are bad, but I think it's also important not to invest in the narrative of failure.
That's true.
Don't invest in it. There is a narrative, okay? It is okay for that narrative to exist, but don't be invested.
Can't be
in
a solid idea.
Yes, exactly.
But progress.
But we also need to build ideas of progress.
That's true.
We need to invest in ideas of progress and narratives of failure.
Again, narratives are just important.
Yeah, but don't invest in the narrative of failure, because then you will only exist for the failure to exist. You get?
Yeah.
So I think that's important. So let's find a solution.
Yeah.
But man, some of those things are like, so you see what I mean? Like the future of tech is not, I'm going to tell you, go do AI.
Yeah.
Or
study digital marketing.
Go do digital marketing, build an app. No, you guys, this thing has
it might lose relevance in a couple of days.
Yeah.
So final thoughts, Odanga, before I let you go.
Sorry, just one more thing.
Go ahead.
The contract between Sama and Facebook, for example, and I mean, this thing is only slated to grow. That contract was worth $4 million. At some point, some of the figures that were there, right, was about like it was. I think it was even higher, right? So that's how much money people are dealing with in the spheres that you don't see that tech depends on,
outside your screen.
Yeah. So I mean, again, that's actually where the real future of tech usually lies.
Yeah.
Because they would want you to only think that the only future of it is for you to create a new AI thing.
Yeah, make content.
Or, make content or do it. But the real side of it is where, like, what are the venture capitalists actually thinking about?
Yeah.
This is what they're
Where is the money
at.
going?
Yeah, exactly.
That's very interesting.
The money is going to nuclear power, carbon offsetting, content moderation, and business process outsourcing. Yeah, the things that enable this interface to exist is where all their budget is thought about. Yeah, lobbying. Someone was saying how, because of how erratic the current Trump administration is, the lobbying industry is about to
make
shoot
billions, I swear,
through the roof, because everybody needs to have someone in Washington. But
otherwise, it's chaotic there.
Exactly. But someone wants to tell you that the future is to build an app. No.
Website.
No.
AI.
That is not where it is.
Pretty interesting. I think this has been and it deserves a part 2. There's so much to debunk. Let's see if we get you. I just want to know, final thoughts, and then we can wrap it up.
About what?
Anything, really.
I
tech
don't,
is
that's a trap. That's a trap.
Is
you
it?
You need to give me specifics.
There's freedom of choice in the tech world.
In what do you mean, freedom of speech or which choice?
Anything, really. The topic is tech accountability. Where would you want to leave a full stop of information on?
I don't know. That's a trap. I need specifics. Give me just a good question. I don't like open-ended questions.
They're not open-ended, really.
Yeah.
Are they? So, let me think through it. How can we make the digital space and the digital ecosystem more accountable then? What would be your final thoughts? What is that we need to do then?
It depends. So, I mean, so what I would say is actually this is very important. Number one, tech accountability is not just about social media platforms.
Yeah.
And the reason I say this is because I'm very concerned about the recent rise in the flipping of the work of such as people that like myself have done around tech accountability, mostly targeted towards social media companies, which is now perhaps those narratives sometimes are actively used against people who are actually doing excellent things online towards trying to hold the government accountable and all that. So I'm just concerned about the flipping of that tech accountability narrative. The whole movement by Kabogo to try and start telling people, use social media responsibly. Kenyans are releasing disinformation and all those kind of things. I'm very, very, very concerned about that, because that's actually weaponization of accountability.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a very, very concerning trend. Secondly is that, of course, the scope of tech, again, is much, much wider.
Yeah.
That is not to say, right, that tech accountability only ends there. Right? There's so much more work to do. This week, the Kenyan government has consistently failed to protect Kenyans' data. Failed. failed.
From the Maisha number, Huduma numbers.
Everything. The recent business registration services leak that came out, right? Like, we have a case whereby, there's a lot of accountability, especially as Ruto continues to push for e-citizen to be the gateway to government services. Tech accountability, specifically against the government, is going to be one of the biggest things that we have to fight for.
Literally.
Yeah, because he has to ensure that our data is safe, right? He has to be able to ensure that it's not stolen from us and sold in the dark web. Right? And that there are strategies that they're going to do to keep it from being that vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
There's an increasing effort to digitalize the government. And I think this is actually the most dangerous. Because of how careless our government is, this is actually one of the most dangerous things that I think many of us actually not talking about. Because there will be a day, there'll be a very massive type of leak.
I swear.
That someone will be able to get. In fact, already
we have a W somewhere.
That BRS leak had your PIN, your ID. It already had a lot of your personal information. So if I was able to pair it up with a whole bunch of other things, right? Who cloned that thing? Was cloned. Who cloned that data, right? So these are things that we really need to think about.
Yeah.
Even the government themselves were exposed, because after that's when people were able to see Ruto's shares in Weston, and people were able to see the companies that the political class were invested in.
Yeah.
So this is concerning, right? Even for themselves, for their own self-preservation.
Yeah.
So moving tech accountability more towards also thinking about what it means in this dispensation, where we have a government that is very much trying to push for as much services to be digitalized as possible. We need to deal with that. Yeah. And of course, we've got a whole bunch of other extractive companies that are around.
Yeah.
And what are they doing with their data? What are they doing with their services? Right? What are the rights of Uber drivers? Remember,
Bolt.
Exactly. Uber drivers, Bolt riders, the guy who brings you your food. I'll give you an example. I have so many examples.
We need to wrap up.
But do I have time? No, it's over. Because I was going to give you an example about how in the States, and this probably parallels here, is how, because of the pressure to deliver food on time, that's actually one of the primary reasons motorbike riders, like riders in the US for DoorDash, were dying, because they had to get their food to you on time. If it's any minute less, right, because of the promise that you make to consumers, the convenience that they want. If it's any minute less, they would get a cut off of their commission. And sometimes many of them would die because they're rushing, right? Yeah, so many of them would be in accidents because they were overspeeding. You get? So this thing is wide. There's a lot to think about. And I'm sure the same happens when that guy who's coming to bring you food, if you ever find that he was in an accident, right, for your food delivery app, please ask yourself, how exactly did he end up in that accident? And how is the business model, which brings you so much convenience in this world, how might that have contributed to him not being able to bring you your food?
Well,
that's it.
Thank you so much for having time for us. This has been very, very expansive and very comprehensive. Thank you so much. We'll see you guys in the next episode. I'm your host, Zaha Speaks. Speak Up Africa is a digital that creates space for digital conversations to be made, specifically from end-to-end usage, from the users of the technological spaces, to the producers of it, to the creators, to the innovators, to the labor rights, to the policy increments, to governance, and all other technological dimensions. This is Speak Up Africa. I am Zaha Speaks. We inform, engage, and empower.